Welcome to another conversation from the Virtual Valley, our bespoke COVID response videocast from the community of writers, the 50-year tradition of creative writing collaboration in the California Sierras. I'm Andrew Tonkovich, editor of the Santa Monica Review and host of Bibliocracy Radio, and a member of that community. We're celebrating, persevering, sharing, and doing our part to sustain both the spirit of our extended membership and provide resources as this one and our Omnium Gatherum Quarterly, website news, and other resources. Thanks to producer Laura Howard and engineer Eva Mellis. For this, our second broadcast, I'm happy to vigorously engage our commitment to intellectual freedom, free expression, free speech, and solidarity with organizations that defend those, especially as they relate to the creative artists, civic literacy, and social change discourse. So, for today's conversation, two of our favorite advocacy and rights organizations. From the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom and sponsor of Banned Books Week, Ellie Diaz, program director, and from PEN America, James Tager, deputy director of free expression research and policy, and author of groundbreaking research, analysis, and recommendations, most recently the report, Literature Locked Up, How Prison Book Restriction Policies Constitute the Nation's Largest Book Ban. I'd like to imagine, viewers, that neither of these two legendary organizations need further introduction, except to say that this is Banned Books Week 2020, September 27th through October 3rd, my own favorite week of civic engagement, and that I'm personally a proud member of PEN America. I will moderate our discussion with little further interruption from me, I promise, between our two experts, and invite them to share more about their organizations and their research, reports, campaigns, and programs. We'll talk for about 40 minutes, and of course, we will share websites, program information of both organizations. Thanks so much, Ellie and James, for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting us. I'm excited.
I'm glad, Ellie. I'm quite genuine about my enthusiasm. I love librarians. I teach research. I'm an advocate, I like to think, for all the good causes. But I'm wondering, just by way of introducing you and the organization, could you tell us who belongs to ALA and maybe who your friends and allies are?
Definitely, for sure. So the American Library Association is a nonprofit organization that supports libraries, their profession, the work that they do in their communities. Our members are librarians, whether they come from public libraries, academic, the school setting, special libraries, also libraries and librarians around the world. It's not just the US. We also have student chapters. We collaborate a lot with booksellers and journalists, especially when, as you said, kind of free expression and advocacy kind of come together. So we love working with those partners. And then the American Library Association is also part of the Banned Books Week Coalition. So that is a group of, I think, about 10 organizations that are dedicated to free expression and the freedom to read. And so it's great to think about. Banned Books Week started in 1982, and it started with these three organizations that kind of scrambled to put something together for Banned Books Week in the month or two time, and now it's kind of blossomed into this national celebration where dozens of organizations and hundreds of libraries, schools, booksellers, journalists are all coming together in shared support of the freedom to read. So a couple of the organizations that we work with are the American Booksellers Association, FIRE, National Council of Teachers of English, National Coalition Against Censorship. So those are just some of our great partners in Banned Books Week, and they're planning some awesome events. So if you want to visit their website, it's at bannedbooksweek.org, and to kind of find out what events they're hosting and how you can get involved.
Nice, thanks so much. I feel I may have buried the lead, except that you just wonderfully revealed it. In fact, one of the partners, James Tager, from PEN America will underscore this. One of the partners is indeed PEN America, who references you folks and your amazing work in some of the research analysis and, in fact, recommendations that it is his work to promote. So James, your turn. A little bit about PEN America, and most specifically, the kind of work that you do.
Sure. PEN America, we are a literature and human rights organization, and our mission is to unite writers and their allies to celebrate and defend creative expression, essentially championing the freedom to write. And we do this both in the United States and worldwide. We were founded in 1922, so we're coming up on our 100th birthday pretty soon, as a literary solidarity organization to advocate on behalf of imprisoned writers around the world who had been targeted for what they wrote. And we try to stay true to that mission today. We have a nationwide community of more than 7,000 novelists, journalists, nonfiction writers, editors, poets. PEN used to stand for poets, editors, and poets, essayists, and novelists, I believe. But now it's, if you are an artistic or literary person, we are proud to have you as a member. And we're also part of an international movement. We are just one of more than 100 centers worldwide that make up a PEN International Network, which essentially was designed around the idea of crossing borders and crossing cultural borders with literary connections and community. And that's something we stick to today.
I think that I might owe you a debt here, James, because in fact, I may retitle our conversation at some point to Literary Solidarity, which is just a terrific, quick go-to by way of the connection between all three of our organization, at least says me.
There's another term I like, conscientious literary citizenship, which is the idea of, if you think of yourself as a literary person, what are the civic, rights and responsibilities of your literary citizenship? And I think organizations like PEN America, like ALA, and many others exist to try and assist their members and constituents in fulfilling those literary civic responsibilities.
Well, and that anticipates my next question as well. Maybe Ellie could start. So many of us creative types, as it were, are not full-time novelists or creative artists. We wish. Maybe in our day jobs, we are administrators, teachers. Maybe we do work unrelated to our lives as poets, essayists, novelists, screenplay writers, dramatists, or whatever. How is the work of the ALA best integrated into whatever aspect of our lives that you'd like to recommend?
Yeah. So first, if I could take it back to a little bit, with the start of this pandemic, personally, I wasn't sure what was kind of going on, and I'm sure other people were in the same spot, but professionally as well, ALA is here to support librarians and even the people who support libraries as well, which includes writers. But we weren't sure kind of how this would work out or how they would need us. Our office in particular provides support for libraries and schools who are undergoing censorship challenges or removal or cancellation of programs or displays. And I was just wondering if, spurred by the pandemic, if censorship would kind of peter out somehow, or, we wouldn't get as many reports, but that turns out to not be true. During this pandemic, our office has documented a lot of threats to intellectual freedom, whether it is an online vote to remove books from a school district, or an online petition to cancel drag queen story times, or a library user wanting to ban all erotic ebooks from the libraries. I mean, these are current threats that are happening during this online environment. So while libraries have fantastically and quickly pivoted to offering more online resources and online programs and being there for their communities, I think censorship as well has kind of navigated and prospered in this online environment. So I just wanted to make the point that censorship is unfortunately alive and well in this pandemic. And I think our office has also documented a lot of challenges and a trend in LGBTQ stories and experiences, and also books about racism and Black Lives Matter and police brutality are continuing to be challenged. So I think this work and the work of PEN and the community of writers is more important than ever. And I think writers especially have a stake in this, writers and educators, because we're at that intersection of advocacy, social justice, the power of words. And I think writers especially can use their creativity and their skills to draw attention to this. So I'm really excited to discuss more about how writers can kind of lead this movement.
Yeah, it sounds like, unfortunately, regardless of whether you're in the virtual office or the virtual classroom, or whether you're visiting the library in person or virtually, unfortunately, you don't have to look too hard to still see these threats to intellectual freedom. And let's be clear, Ellie Diaz from ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom, there's actual censorship, and then arguably as ominous and frightening is the threat or the kind of challenge to access or some other impediment, which becomes almost a kind of default censorship in itself, correct?
Yes, definitely. So there's actual censorship when something is removed or canceled, you know, kind of that physical censorship. And then there's this underlying censorship of either books being silently removed, or a challenge to restrict access, or it could be digital access, or maybe something that doesn't make you think of, you know, banned books week, but it's still censorship, and we still should be drawing attention to this kind of silent censorship.
Nice. Well, as it happens, our other guest happens to be one of the nation's experts by way of a case study. And James, when we chatted in preparation for this Zoom conversation, you advised me that maybe the best way to answer this particular question was for you to review some of the results of this excellent report that you assembled in September of last year, but might need some revisiting and some review, titled Literature Locked Up: How Prison Book Restriction Policies Constitute the Nation's Largest Book Ban. And I'll say up front, one of my early commitments when I took over as editor of a West Coast literary magazine was that every time an incarcerated person would communicate with me, I would make sure to send them a free copy of the magazine, because it turns out there's a lot of people who vet, who throw out, who prevent access to just everyday books to people who are incarcerated. Anyway, you go for it, James.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm, with this Banned Books Week coming up, I look back with a lot of pride at that report, which we produced for Banned Books Week last year. And the reason we not only did the report, but deliberately released it on last year's Banned Books Week is related to, when I lecture on this subject, I always ask the same question, which is, where is the largest book ban in the United States? And I deliberately leave it vague so no one gets it right. But they'll say states, or they'll say a certain school system, but I would argue to you that the answer is the American prison system. With over 2.2 million Americans incarcerated, the system of restrictions on their ability to access literature collectively comprises the largest book ban in the country. And it's, to this day, it's something that's iteratively reported on, including on Banned Books Week. Every Banned Books Week, I would say you'll see some of this information come to light through public reporting and then die back down again. And you'll see a new case and it'll come back up and die back down again. And yet, even so, I think the average American is not aware that many U.S. states, U.S. state prison systems have actual banned books lists that are actually, at times, thousands of titles long. Texas is often pointed to as where we believe they may have up to 15,000 titles of banned books. And by books, I mean books as well as other publications. So that report and a lot of PEN America's engagement on Banned Books Week last year, and including through this year, is to try and frame this as an issue of access to literature for a large portion of the American population. And you will have content-based bans, where books are banned from reaching an incarcerated person because of what's presumed to be the content of that book. And you also have what I call content neutral bans, where books as packages are banned, supposedly because of concerns of contraband getting into the prison through the book. So, but those types of content neutral bans can be just as, if not more destructive to the incarcerated population's access to literature than any content-based bans, because that can block essentially large categories of books from entering into a specific prison. Now, this is an issue that's particularly important, I would say, today during the height of the coronavirus, when we think about the fact that the average prison has responded by ending in-person visitations, has responded by ending educational programming that requires a physical presence, and has put incarcerated people into lockdown, where essentially what they're able to read is one of their only sources of education and information. So when we think about that, the issue of access to literature for the incarcerated population is particularly important right now.
I'll just remind viewers that it's my privilege to be speaking with Ellie Diaz from the ALA Office of Intellectual Freedom and James Tager from PEN America. James, I mean this sincerely. I didn't think I could get even more involved with your report than I already was until I got to the place where there were the testimonials from incarcerated women and men who talked about, the breakthrough, the insight, the freeing experience of discovering a book. I mean, we all know the self-education of Malcolm X, and we've heard this narrative, but to actually read in your report from PEN America last year, people citing a particular text as a life-changing moment where they read something in prison, and not to be cliche, but turned a corner and were able to reframe their experience and then inform their life when they left. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's we have more that we didn't put in the report. PEN America, another aspect of our work is we have a long-running prison and justice writing program, which works with incarcerated writers to match them with mentors and give them opportunities to get their work out into the broader world. And through that, we converse with a lot of people who either write or who read and share those experiences with us. A quote that I constantly, and I just mean consistently, go back to on this is from one of our nation's foremost jurists, who was Thurgood Marshall, and he writes that when the prison gates, this was in I think Turner v. Safley, a 1974 concurrence, but he writes, when the prison gates slam behind an inmate, he does not lose his human quality. His mind does not become closed to ideas, and his intellect does not cease to feed on a free and open interchange of opinions. If anything, the needs for identity and self-respect are more compelling in the dehumanizing prison environment. And that's a quote that really kind of sums up a lot of it. Prison is a dehumanizing experience, and books are inherently humanizing. They offer connection, education, entertainment. They offer sort of a window into what people are thinking about in the outside world. And when we deny incarcerated people access to that, it's entrenching that dehumanizing experience. And of course, there's a lot of information about the rehabilitative benefits of access to literature. But overall, one of the things we stress in this report and in our further advocacy on this issue is that our basic argument about this is a moral one, that human beings deserve access to literature, and that includes the incarcerated population.
One more question, and then I promise I'll go to Ellie.
Yep.
But regarding your report, James, I was also struck by the problematic ratio of available physical or ebooks to prisoners, and also I'm going to sound like I'm making a political judgment here, and maybe I am, but some of the vetting of texts in the prison library seemed to me to purposely advance a kind of, I don't know what to call it, benign picture of available reading, cookbooks, entertainment, and what seemed to me to be a kind of a cherry picking out of provocative and intellectually challenging work in favor of, I'm sorry, just, you know, the lowest common denominator. Am I wrong?
No, I completely concur. Let me start by saying, by the way, the Marshall's decision was Percuner versus Martinez, not Turner v. Safley. As a legally trained person, that would just eat away at me if I left that unaddressed. That I put
Well
that
done, counselor.
But the issue of ebooks is perhaps the cutting edge of the issue of access to literature in American prisons today. This is a new trend. We're seeing states across the country make contracts with ebook providers, and there's really almost a duopoly of ebook providers who provide sort of the majority of paid for ebooks with paid for content, and that's GTL and Eventive. And our biggest concern is the idea that ebooks will be used as a replacement for books rather than an adjunct to them. That prison systems will essentially force, as we saw attempted to occur in Pennsylvania, I believe last year, that you will see prison systems essentially attempt to force incarcerated people to use ebooks in lieu of physical books rather than in addition to them. This is problematic for several reasons. One reason, of course, is often you have to pay for ebook content. You know, earlier this year, we had the privilege of being one of the driving forces behind an open letter to the CEOs of Eventive and Global Telling GTL, again, the two main producers of e-readers, calling for them to waive their fees for access to e-reader content during the coronavirus. Again, this is a time when you have incarcerated people who are literally sort of just stuck in their bunks on lockdown. And anything we can do to increase their access to literature and other sources of education and information is really a moral imperative. And furthermore, you know, the idea that we should not be adding financial burdens to incarcerated people and their families during this really difficult time. And we're continuing to call for that. But this is, if you, the listener to this, are interested in access to literature in American prisons, the issue of e-readers and making sure they're rolled out in a responsible and thoughtful way, and with the ultimate goal of increasing access to literature for the incarcerated population, as opposed to winnowing it or redirecting it. That's really the goal here. Regarding your other point, I absolutely agree with you that it seems like, and this was this is what we concluded as a result of our look into it in this report, and it maps a lot onto issues of race, issues of power, issues of inequality. The books that criticize the United States or aspects of the system, including the prison industrial complex or mass incarceration, are more likely to be banned. And they're banned under these kind of vague reasons that provide the banner, the individual prison official, with a massive amount of discretion that often leads to arbitrary bannings. Things like, and it may encourage anti-authority behavior or may encourage racial animus. I mean, these are all concepts that are so vague that they allow the individual decision maker, which, by the way, is often just some mailroom clerk in the mailroom deciding whether the book that was mailed to an individual incarcerated person, whether that person is going to receive the book or not. They make the decision. They look at this and say, oh my goodness, this is too critical. This is, you know, this represents a problem to the order and security of the institution, and they reject it. So it's infantilizing. It is, you know, it is essentially trying to present, as you put, this sort of benign neglect attitude, lowest common denominator of what our incarcerated population, what ideas they're allowed to be exposed to, regardless of the truth or not. One of the books that made the rounds for being banned in prisons, different prison systems and individual institutions across the country last year was Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow, which is an examination of the prison industrial complex as a continuation of racist policies, including slavery. So you have prison officials blocking incarcerated people from seeing the books that criticize those same prison officials and the institution at large. And you don't have to go to law school to say, well, gee, that's really sketchy. And it is.
It's also from the Department of You Can't Make This Stuff Up. It's like a parody of a Terry Gilliam, dystopia movie where the prisoners can't read about being prisoners. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, you'll see books that are banned for ostensibly teaching prisoners, incarcerated people, sort of techniques on how to pass messages from one cell to another. And it's like, if you're incarcerated, you already know these things from being incarcerated. Like, you don't need some kid's book author to explain it to you. And that form of kind of lack of critical engagement with what is the actual purpose of ensuring incarcerated people's access to literature, and seeing things only through this mono view of security, and anything that potentially can go down an insecure path gets banned. A great example is how one prison in upstate New York, I believe, banned books that had maps of the moon. The thought process appearing to be, well, if you can read a map, then you'll read a map of the area around the prison, and that will help you escape. So we better block all maps, including maps of the moon, as if that is somehow relevant to an incarcerated person's, life and security.
Yeah, again, a really wonderfully written report, and you can't make this stuff up. Ellie, now's our chance to talk about Banned Books Week, and I'll just share with you, and I'll challenge you folks to tell your own stories, if you like, about why you're personally involved or what motivates you. When I was about 15 or so, fairly precocious reader, I went to my public library in the LA suburb where I grew up, and the book that I wanted was supposed to be on the shelf, and it wasn't there. So I went and asked the librarian what was up, and to her credit, she looked at me and went behind the little lobby area and found the book, which was presumably for adults, and she gave it to me. And I think that sort of funny transgression a little bit on her part, good for her, but also the fact that it existed has been part of my own, not only navigating this world, but my inspiration. So when this is all my big lead up to saying, I love telling that story and joining the read-ins and other events celebrating Banned Books Week. And I think I indicated to you, I'll be doing that at the University of California this week, where I teach, where we're all being asked to consider reading an excerpt, especially from a writer of color. So now's a chance to advertise.
Well, that is amazing. I'm sure others have similar stories that have kind of led them on this path or started their journey toward the freedom to read. And that's a great segue to the Banned Books Week 2020 theme, Censorship is a Dead End, Find Your Freedom to Read. And it's kind of all about navigating those barriers that censorship enacts and really finding your way either to the library or to the bookstore and really exploring all of these new perspectives. I started out on my journey to the freedom to read I just remember like in high school, I wrote a short story about banned book characters being stuck in the restricted section. And then I found that essay a couple years ago, and I was like, okay. And then in college for a journalism course, I handmade these bookmarks and printed them off at the libraries with statistics about banned books and then passed them around. So I feel like all of these little events have kind of led me to be an advocate against censorship and for the freedom to read. But what I think is great about Banned Books Week, but also not so great about censorship, is that it's very personal and it's emotional. And I think that's why a lot of people get involved. I think for the person who is being restricted, it's very emotional and personal. Imagine someone saying that your stories or your experiences, this isn't the place for them, this isn't the setting, and they're not allowed here. I even think it's emotional and personal for the person who is banning the book or trying to get bookstore programs banned, because in their mind, they're thinking that they might be protecting their family or all of the families of the community. So it's kind of emotional for them. And then I think for anyone who is hearing about these censorship incidents, it's, we're very passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. I'm sure, you're passionate about it, and people who hear about it are very passionate about just defending intellectual freedom of everyone. So I think it's very emotional, and that's why people get involved with Banned Books Week. And I think it's even more emotional with, you know, social media, and we're seeing what's going around the world, is like seeing pictures of students outside their high school with protest signs in the rain, protesting a book that was removed from their school district, or a student starting their own Twitter profile against a book that was removed, or a writer or a librarian or an educator speaking up at a board meeting. It is just remarkable to see these stories. And I think Banned Books Week in particular is, you know, we can share these stories year round, but Banned Books Week is just this one week where we all come together, all perspectives, all walks of life, come together just in shared support of the freedom to read and to defend these stories and experiences. So I'm very excited for this upcoming Banned Books Week.
Right, and just to remind people, if you just do a Google search, at any rate, it's ALA Banned Books Week. There are many ways to support. I'm so moved by your connection of the political, the emotional, and the intellectual. And I just, you know, I'm an activist like you two, but it pleased me on a button you can get if you want through ALA, or a t-shirt, or have a coffee mug, or do the bookmarks, or just start talking to people about, you know, did you know that this is an urgent and very much present issue, and spin it to a celebration of resistance and encouragement. And I'm going to crib from my friend James here, literary solidarity, just like you would on any other terrific holiday. So it's not hard, and I swear, people, you'll feel better, and you will have done something to advance this important issue. James, I think you come maybe from the legal side, but probably also the activist side. What inspires or motivates or animates your own engagement with this issue?
Well, you know, before I started with PEN America, I was living abroad. I was a human rights researcher in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, in Burma especially, which I was based in Burma for over a year, Myanmar. And I'd be in the room countless number of times, a lot of people my age who had gone to jail for peacefully expressing themselves. Whether that was through something they wrote, something they said, attending a protest, etc. And that's an experience that's been formative for me and stayed with me for a long, long time. The idea that you know, just the rank injustice of the idea of someone being so brutally punished for expressing their opinions and for advocating for their beliefs. So seeing that really brought home for me the importance of defense of freedom of expression. You know, sometimes we'll say in the human rights world that freedom of expression is kind of the right that undergirds all the other rights, because if you're not able to advocate for any of your other rights, you really can't get far in rights advocacy. So that is certainly something that comes to mind for me that I draw from. You know, and obviously, you know, especially in Myanmar, I also saw things such as the consequences of hate speech, and obviously, you know, there's so much work to be done in that realm as well, and a moral urgency there to making sure that the speech that we have in the civic discourse in the world is representative of broad perspectives, diverse perspectives, and making sure that we societally are able to you know, push back against when noxious ideas are presented. But to this day, a lot of my work internationally is focusing on autocratic systems that put people in jail for expressing ideas they disfavor. And it's really my great privilege to push back against that, you know, against any system which tries to make headway with the idea that we should block or ban, you know, other perspectives or ideas from entering the public sphere in a thoughtful way.
that seems like a good place to remind people of the resources that are available to them. Ellie, I believe on the ALA site, people can find lists of challenged and censored books. What else would you like to highlight from that long list of resources over there at the Office of Intellectual Freedom?
Like you mentioned, we have lots of lists of banned and challenged books, and we're also releasing on the first day of Banned Books Week, the list of 100 most frequently banned and challenged books from the past decade. So that'll be really interesting to look at as well. On our website, ala.org/BBOOKS, Ebooks, we have so many resources that you can events and resources that you can easily get involved with Banned Books Week, whether it's posting, an infographic on Twitter, tweeting a statistic, joining our Scary Stories watch party, or podcasts or webinars. We have a lot of things planned for Banned Books Week. So feel free to use the resources. If you don't see anything that you can find useful, you can always email me and ask for a specific resource too. We really just want to help you spread the word about censorship and the freedom to read.
Or you can go DIY and stand out on a corner and read from a banned book, and after somebody stops and asks you why, you can speak through your mask and tell them why. Hey, James Tager from PEN America, is it possible that members of the community of writers could join PEN America?
Very much so, and we'd be, we'd be happy to be considered by all your members out there. You should check out our website, www.pen.org, pen as in the writing implement, and that will give you a sense of what we've been up to, how to join, and what membership looks like. And it's certainly, coincidentally, one of the places where you can find the report that we've been mentioning on this, which is Literature Locked Up. And I certainly would be flattered by anyone who wants to read it. You can also, of course, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and so on, and see our continuing messaging and advocacy. And we also have a newsletter called the Daily Alert on Rights and Expression. That came out much more difficult than I intended it to be. But and that gives information about kind of the issues that we are monitoring in the world of free expression rights, both domestically and internationally. And you can also check that out on our website.
I believe that viewers will divine my own enthusiasm and gratitude by way of you folks taking time to do this. I've got my nifty outro, and I want to read it right now, but say again, thank you so much to Ellie Diaz, ALA Program Director, and James Tager, Research Director at PEN America. The community of writers is so very proud to help advance the respective missions of both of these organizations. And friends, please anticipate our next conversation from the virtual valley, where we will share the community of writers' own vision of a creative writing project dedicated to artistry, collaboration, and social justice. Again, James and Ellie, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. All best to both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.